Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. These are our headlines from across the continent this evening. Zimbabwe's opposition party has been labelled as terrorist by the president, Emmerson Mnangagwa. He was addressing his government's clampdown on protests, which saw scores of opposition members and government critics arrested. We'll hear more from Ryan Truscott about that tense situation in Zimbabwe. Nigeria reopened its secondary schools on Tuesday, a big step towards emerging from strict COVID-19 restrictions. We'll hear the latest from our correspondent in Lagos. And could virtual tours of Rwanda be one way of inciting visitors to visit its many attractions once tourism kicks off again? We'll take a look at one tech initiative to boost the number of visitors to the country. Thanks for watching. Now we start in Zimbabwe, where rights lawyers say up to 60 people have been arrested in recent days in connection with anti-government, anti-corruption protests last Friday. The security clampdown triggered widespread condemnation using the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter. Now, in response, President Emmerson Mnangagwa has hit out at what he called dark forces trying to divide the country. In a speech at State House in the Zimbabwean capital, he said those promoting hate and disharmony would be flushed out. Let's take a listen.
My administration has faced many hurdles and attacks since its inauguration. These included the divisive politics of some opposition elements, the illegal economic sanctions, cyclones, droughts, and more recently, the deadly COVID-19 pandemic. We will overcome attempts at destabilization of our society by a few rogue Zimbabweans acting in league with foreign detractors. The bad apples that have attempted to divide our people and to weaken our systems will be flushed out.
An accusation of foreign interference there in alignment with the opposition. For more on today's events in Harare, here's Ryan Truscott.
This was President Emmerson Mnangagwa very much on the defensive. His speech was live streamed from State House in Harare early this morning. The president said that dark forces inside and outside the country were trying to divide Zimbabweans. He also vowed to flush out bad apples, an apparent reference to opponents and critics who tried to stage anti-corruption protests last week but were thwarted by a huge deployment of soldiers and police across the country. President Mnangagwa's government is coming under huge and perhaps unexpected pressure from activists using the social media hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter. The hashtag was started by activists here, and now it's taken on a life of its own and got high-profile international support. Former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf used it to tweet her support for some of those detained during last Friday's peaceful protests. Lawyers say that up to 60 opposition supporters have now been arrested before, during and after last Friday's protests. The main opposition MDC Alliance says some of its supporters and leaders have also been harassed and targeted in the wake of those demonstrations. And of course, all this comes amid mounting social and economic problems that are affecting so many people in Zimbabwe. High inflation, a doctors and nurses strike, and an upswing in coronavirus cases. And then this evening, we just heard that President Mnangagwa had appointed his Vice President, Constantino Chiwenga, as the new health minister. It's a controversial choice. Chiwenga has been in poor health himself recently, and 2 years ago he fired thousands of nurses for going on strike. Will he take a hard line now? The MDC Alliance says his appointment is a gross display of incompetence.
In Nigeria, secondary schools reopened on Tuesday, 4 months after they were shut to limit the spread of COVID-19. It's a high-pressure time for final-year students, with just 2 weeks to go before exams. And with more on that, here's Sam Olokoya in Lagos.
The schools have been reopened to allow final-year senior secondary school students to return to school and hold their exams. The exams are coming up sometimes this month. The government said some conditions have to be fulfilled before any school is reopened. These include the provision of running water, the provision of hand sanitizers, and ensuring that students sufficiently maintain social distance. The Nigerian Union of Teachers has warned that if conditions are not right, they will withdraw their members from the schools. The union says Nigerians have not been going by the COVID-19 protocols has set up by the government, and they fear that if adults cannot comply with these protocols, they have fears that children may not be able to go by these protocols. We've also had concerns being raised by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. The task force said it fears that the schools potentially could become a place where COVID-19 would be spread, and this task force is against the reopening of schools. What we've seen in the past is that the government has increasingly released the lockdown. We've seen, as we are seeing, the reopening of schools, and then later this week, churches and mosques will be reopened. And many people are actually concerned that when you completely lift the lockdown, you could create a problem. Nigeria at the moment has a little more than 44,000 cases, and there are fears that if we have more cases, it will be difficult for the medical facilities we have in the country to cope with increasing cases.
Algeria is to gradually relax its COVID-19 restrictions. That means mosques, beaches and parks will begin to open progressively, all of this after 5 months of strict closures to combat the pandemic. Social distancing will be enforced along with the wearing of face masks. Algeria has registered over 1,200 fatalities, making it the third worst affected African country after South Africa and Egypt. Botswana is home to 1/3 of Africa's elephant population, but recently hundreds of them have been dying in mysterious circumstances in one of the country's national parks. The cause put forward by conservationists is a natural toxin, but beyond that, a clearer picture of why this is happening has not yet emerged. Simon Harding reports.
One elephant after another, lying dead across the bush. In total, 356 carcasses were strewn across this national park in Botswana. The cause of the mysterious deaths seems to be a natural toxin, with the investigation focusing on bacteria which could possibly be in sources of water. After several preliminary tests, the Department of Wildlife and National Parks are focusing their efforts on verifying whether or not the natural environment of the animals contributed to their deaths.
So far, 275 carcasses have been verified of the 356 reported. The team has collected a number of biological samples from the fresh carcasses and also some environmental samples which have been sent to different labs for further analysis. And in the meantime, the team continue to monitor the situation.
The latest finds definitely exclude poaching as the cause of death, illegal hunting of elephants being the primary reason for their population's decline on the African continent. Conservationists, however, remain worried that if the cause of this tragedy isn't confirmed soon, more elephants may be at risk.
Coronavirus has closed borders and stifled the tourism industry around the world, but in Rwanda, tech entrepreneurs are creating online virtual reality tours to tempt visitors back to the country. It's one way, at least, of increasing the incentive for visitors to come later if they can't visit Rwanda just yet. Laurent Berstecker has more.
For the past 2 years, Patrick Karangwa has been mapping out some of Rwanda's most impressive sites in order to offer virtual reality tours of the country. A project which recently took on a new dimension with the emergence of COVID-19.
It's unfortunate that the pandemic hit the industry in general, but for me as a virtual tour content creator, it was actually an opportunity.
Last year, Rwanda brought in nearly $500 million in tourism revenue. But the industry has been hard hit by the global pandemic, with the country already losing an estimated $45 million this year, largely due to dwindling tourism and cancelled international events. Thousand Hills Africa, a Kigali-based tour operator, says the crisis has cast a shadow over the company's future.
It's our peak season, our busiest time, and we don't have a single tourist in the country yet.
In this context, virtual tours represent a beacon of hope for the battered industry. While they don't generate as much revenue as regular old-fashioned tourism, their main purpose is to encourage travelers to visit Rwanda in person once health restrictions are lifted.
We've used that a lot during this lockdown time when people were not traveling to entice people to come back, to plan to come back, and to remind people of what's out there.
This is Rwanda.
In recent years, Rwanda has invested heavily in tourism, from international sponsorship deals to developing local initiatives such as trekking. A strategy authorities seem intent on pursuing despite the pandemic, as they've recently injected $50 million into tech-driven tourism initiatives to help with post-COVID recovery.
Now, it's a case of third time very lucky for one miner in Tanzania. He had found 2 tanzanite gemstones worth some €3 million back in June. Now he's unearthed another. Now, as with the first giant gems, he sold them to the government, making a cool €1.7 million for his first, or for his latest finds. He made €1.7 million. The first 2 made him almost €3 million. Tanzania is called after, in fact, the Tanzanite rock, which is one of the world's rarest stones. Mining accounts for about 17% of the country's GDP. Here's hoping maybe he'll find a 4th gem. That's it for tonight. Thanks for watching.